I mean, what's kind of beautiful about this movie is that he deals with a bunch of seedy people, including Ed Harris, who's part of the FBI, right? Um,
Hmm.
but he himself never does anything actually illegal. Like he follows the
I'm
law
I'm
apart.
pretty sure he kicked Wilfred Brimley to death. So besides that,
I finally
Watched.
I finally
Watched. I
finally
watched. I
finally
watched.
I finally
Watched.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of I Finally Watched. I'm Alain.
and this is David, and today I finally watched The Firm.
I think the most unbelievable thing is that I've seen this movie before you.
Yeah, but I mean, you watched it within like the last year or something, so like pump the brakes.
What? So?
I started it within the last year too, and I don't know. I've started a lot of movies recently where, like, for whatever reason, at that point in time, I wasn't ready to watch like that movie. And this, like, I don't know. I'm also in kind of a slump with movies where I'm like, I'm kind of glad we do the podcast to force me to to finish movies. Um, with what the kids get in the way and all. That's what they do, is just get in the way of my movie watching.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Mm-hmm.
digress. But I didn't finish it, and then now coming back to it, um, obviously I always say I'm glad we do it, even when it's like a bad movie.
Even when you're not glad.
But this was a good movie. It's just like tonally so different than I saw the trailer before, and I've like seen these photos where it's just fucking Tom Cruise running, which he loves to do in all of his movies. But like,
Yep.
I thought this was going to be darker than it was, and it's really like, I don't know. It's like a fucking an early '90s like thriller, but still like never feels dangerous. You know what I mean? Like, at no point was I like worried for him, or like, it's just the stakes
Well, were
felt
you
like lower.
were you not worried for him because it's Tom Cruise?
Yeah, I imagine Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise doesn't take parts where Tom Cruise doesn't succeed.
Right. I mean, I couldn't imagine Tom Cruise in something like The Departed, in Damon's role or something like that, you know?
I wanted to do a Tom Cruise impression where he's like, "I'm not a fucking cop."
Yeah, but you have to jump up on Oprah's couch to do a good impression of Tom Cruise.
Topical, topical.
Circa early 2000s. Yeah, so, I watching this film and knowing really little to nothing about how lawyers are made and it,
In a
how
lab,
huh?
how they're made in a lab.
Oh, in a lab. Yeah, well, it's just like how firms seek out lawyers and you know, kind of try to beat each other in the offer area. It was interesting to me, and I don't know if it was just the movie being, a movie, but is that kind of the way it is still?
Well, I wasn't top 5 at Harvard, so it wasn't we didn't have the exact same experience that Mitch McDeere had. It also came out during a recession. But it is, a lot of times you'll have these firms that will come to law schools, and, they will you put in a resume and, like, your transcripts from that point, and you get, internships, paid jobs for, 8 weeks during the summer, and then a lot of times, if you don't fuck up, then that, like, turns into your job. Um, and so, but yeah, with like the really high up people at schools, and I imagine like the better the school, the more it works like that. We should get Garrett on because he went to a better law school than I did. But it yeah, it's like they do. It's not really like competing like that. And then this is also kind of taken to 11 because like this is a mafia law firm. Like, these are just bad guys who can offer like way more money.
Right.
Um, but yeah, like you interview with a ton of people, they're giving out offers, and if they have someone they really want. But the thing now is, and I guess we can get into the money now, because this is like I found so interesting and I wanted to talk about, and I know you did too, because we talked about before this. So I think when we hear his offers in the beginning, when we're getting this montage, the most he was offered is $70,000, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um, and he was offered 96
that's the
by
deal.
this,
That's the deal he took.
right, from the Memphis firm. And just like in a numbers thing, which is so 70,000 in 1993 is equivalent to about 146 according to Google. And then when I looked up earlier, 96,000 is equivalent to about 200,000.
Right.
Like
That's
the purchasing power of it today.
yeah. And like
Um
he said, it's like in LA it wouldn't have been that big of a deal, but in Memphis it's like you can go so much farther with it.
and I couldn't quickly find the cost of living difference for 1993, but in today's terms, it looked like the cost of living was about 53% different.
Well, it's kind of crazy because whether you're talking about 200,000, above that, it's like it's almost like coming out of uh college with an offer of $250,000 a year. Especially if you add in that they repay his student loans, give him a car and a house. It's basically that.
When I don't even know, it's funny is so there are other jobs you can go into where you can make more, but there's kind of few that you can go into straight out of school and make as much. So like doctors, right, have their 4 years of residency.
Yeah.
And then like kind of like investment banker types, they don't make 250,000. Like I don't think they make it right out the fucking gates. Maybe some do. I don't know. But that part of it is interesting. So there's this thing called like the Cravath scale. It's like one of the top law firms, and they basically a lot of times will set the market for what all other big law firms try and match. So that currently is at $215,000 for coming out of law school.
Plus a repayment on the loans, Mercedes Benz and a house.
No, they don't do that shit.
Oh.
Maybe the mafia firms do. And what's funny is like other lawyers I always talk with it are just like every lawyer I've talked to when we've brought up that has always said no lawyer out of law school is worth that amount of money, because it's
Well,
like
sure.
you don't know what you're doing.
Well, what's insane is that not only is he top 5 of his class in Harvard, which is very impressive, but what's crazy is that he's offered this before passing the bar. Is that normal?
Yeah, because
Oh, it is?
you take the bar after you graduate. And it's funny too, because there are some people. So I passed the bar before I had a job. First try, whatever, Um, and then I would like hear about other people who had jobs and were working and like failed like 2 or 3 times. And like one guy I heard about was like about to take it his 4th time, and the firm was like, "We have to fire you this time if you don't pass." And then he failed again, and they didn't fire him. They just let him try again. I was like, "What the like, guys? There's so many attorneys. Like, why are you doing this? Like, why are you
Well,
keeping this guy on?"
yeah. Well, what's funny too is like the whole crux of the movie is that, and Tom Cruise realizes this towards the end. He's like, I can get everything I want, everything I need out of the law firm, the FBI, everything, if I myself just follow the law, like straight and narrow. And apart from like, I mean, what's kind of beautiful about this movie is that he deals with a bunch of seedy people, including Ed Harris, who's part of the FBI, right? Um,
Hmm.
but he himself never does anything actually illegal. Like he follows the
I'm
law
I'm
apart
pretty sure he kicked Wilford Brimley to death. So besides that,
Wait, what part when?
when Wilford Brimley comes in and shoots the guy from Saw. And then he gets the jump on him.
Oh,
He kicks the
right.
gun away and then kicks him like 20 more times. Now
No,
he
I
wouldn't.
think he's alive. Plus, it would be self-defense, which technically is not against the law.
I mean, so if let's say Wilford Brimley dies, right? Then the only person who can testify about this is Tom Cruise. And so yeah, Tom Cruise would not get charged. But if you had a video showing you this incident, which we do,
Right.
Tom Cruise gets the drop on him, the gun is away, Wilford Brimley is violently obese, and he just continually kicks the shit out of him on the ground. Like at that point, it's not self-defense after like 2 kicks, and then he just keeps kicking him.
What's beautiful about that scene, I know we're jumping like way ahead, is that he kills Jigsaw, and it just makes it look like that they killed him like each other somehow. Like maybe, investigators can solve that, but whoever finds the trail of bodies that Tom Cruise leaves behind is going to have the most confusing time, because you and I both know that everything is probably being covered up by the mafia at that point.
Yeah, I
There's
don't
no
think
paper
there's.
trail. There's nothing.
Yeah,
Anyways,
well, I mean, they never found the bodies from the 2 lawyers that die in the beginning of the movie, right?
right.
Or they did find them, but then they didn't find the 3rd body, the guy who was captaining the boat. So,
No,
yeah,
but
we can
what
get back to.
my point is that he follows the law, and he kind of, and I think that's what's really cool about the movie is that that's all he had to do to kind of win out.
Like, well, yeah, I mean, the movie does do this like very hokey kind of like, if I just do the right thing, then everything will work out. You know what I mean? Which is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I kind of also wish that they kind of invented a better thing than like the way they got Capone is the way they got these guys in the film too, you know?
And I also wish that Gene Hackman hadn't have stopped Mitch's wife until she was naked and said, "No, no, don't do that."
Uh the crazy thing about Gene Hackman is that I feel like he is like the Kevin Spaceys of the 80s, the 70s and
With
80s. And well,
without
without the
without the
horrible
controversy,
horribleness.
without being a bad person, yeah.
Um and the reason I think this is because he always plays this really awesome villain. And what's interesting about uh like his character in this kind of reminds me of his character in Kevin Spacey's character in Baby Driver, is where they're horrible, they're despicable until the very end. They're like a little redeemable. Like in Baby Driver, he takes the bullet from uh Ansel Elgort, uh from John Hamm. And then in this one, Gene Hackman lets her go, like tells her, like warns her to like get the hell out of the hotel. And but the other draw, like the other connection, is that they both played Lex Luthor.
That's good. Would you need to do this the whole time? Is you just want to say the Lex Luthor connection? Is that what we were getting at?
Because
You're
well, no, but it's just because I always make the conclusion, like I always draw similarities between them two because of the Lex Luthor role.
well, also, you once again are back on spoiling a movie that has nothing to do with this one. So I hope people have seen Baby Driver.
Well, I mean, you should. It's great. Um, all right, let's start at the beginning. We have Tom Cruise going around, and it's a montage of him getting all these um offers until he settles on the Memphis one.
He's also playing basketball with a judge, and he's like this all-American guy who's working his way through law school, which is not a thing you can do really anymore. Yeah, and then he gets the offer from Memphis, tells the wife, and then they go on a trip there. Um, and the movie is like, introduced to this other couple, and the movie just comes out, and they're like, "Yep, all of them are white men, and they're all married, and like that's the way the law firm wants it." And we had a woman once, and
It didn't
at
work
first,
out.
yeah, they said it didn't work out, and then you find out it's like because they murdered her.
Well, it's kind of crazy too because he gets the offer, and they do this mind game thing, where it's like, hey, if you are the lawyer that we think you are, that's worth this much in the envelope, you won't need to open the envelope to accept our offer. When he goes back home, he has the envelope and he has his wife open it. Um, they live in like a small one-bedroom apartment. Like he literally went from rags to riches in a day, which is kind of crazy if you think about it that way.
The divisive, like, if you're a lawyer worth your salt, you won't have to open it. I was like, what is the fucking, like, Yuri Geller? Like, he's gonna do a trick where he just sticks the envelope against his fucking head and is like, 96,000. Well, because and then it just leads to him just like asking questions to the guy. And so it's like, well, so and how much would you have to put in there to secure? And they're like 20% more than any other offer. And it's like, so you just wanted him to like do a direct examination and ask you questions to figure out the amount? Like,
Well, what's kind of funny is that maybe I didn't think of it initially when I was watching it, but they kind of make him do a song and dance for them, right?
yeah.
And the whole movie is they're kind of making him do a song and dance until he flips it on his head. So the movie very quickly establishes that these guys like control and they like playing puppeteer, right? But Tom Cruise is smart enough to like not, do it and do it well, but like get over them in the end.
Yeah. No, I agree. So we get to the trip to Memphis where they're going to just check out this firm. And I like the part where they get to the party the next day and the one woman is like, it's not forbidden for the women to work. And she's like, well, why would it be forbidden? And she's like, I said it's not. And it's like, but yeah, but why did you need to say it?
Well, what's crazy too is when she gets out of that conversation and they go to like talk in private, um, she tells him, "Hey, I get a weird vibe from these folks. Like, I don't like this. Maybe we should back out. Like, this is not good." And he gives her all these excuses, not just because of the money, but he's like, "Oh, we'll be close to your family." Blah 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 blah. The dynamic of her being independently wealthy, like her family is very wealthy, and he comes from nothing, and now it's like he he's the breadwinner. I mean, I know he worked his way through law school, but she like she helped him a lot probably, right? Like she probably carried him a majority of the way. So he's like, "No, I'm the breadwinner now."
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that he's like, I need to, take the more like traditionally manly role of like providing for you because you've done this for me for so long. There's also this like unstated thing that we get later where it's like he wants to. I guess I don't know. Does he want to be near his brother, or is that just like happenstance for the movie?
I
You
think
know?
it's happenstance because he's ashamed. I love it how in the interview where they're like, "Do you have any siblings?" and he says no. But the way he says no, I I wonder if you're like in that real life situation, if someone responds to you that way, you would be like, okay, you're hiding something. But I feel like in the moment, the way he did it is like, if you're talking to him, then you wouldn't have caught it. But we, the audience, caught the subtle nuance of him lying. Um,
Well, you must have caught it because you rewatched it because you don't catch it the first time because you don't know.
I forgot. I mean, it's been like a year and a half since I've seen it. I completely forgot he had a brother. I caught it. I was like, oh, why is he saying that weird?
Oh, yeah, I didn't know David Strathairn was going to make an appearance. I didn't know David Strathairn had been acting so long because I had never seen him in anything since. I just watched. It's so funny because I just watched The Bourne Legacy like twice last week because I fucking love that movie, and he's in it. And it's funny because that's the fourth one. It's Jeremy Renner, so Matt Damon is not even in the movie, but in the beginning, it's
Right.
connecting to it. And David Strathairn's like has the scene where he's like, "Oh my god, it's Jason Bourne." And it's like that's like the most memeable moment from that series. Although there's
It's
also, I think there's the fifth one with the black guy who says, "Oh fuck, it's Jason Bourne too." Like, but those two,
So I forget who it is. I think it's him, but the line is Jesus Christ. It's Jason
yeah.
Bourne. And the reason I remember that verbatim is because all the memes go Jason Bourne. It's Jesus Christ.
But anyway, so just I don't know why I felt the need to connect that. I love the Bourne Legacy, and it's too bad we can't do it.
Yeah.
So they decide to move to Memphis, and his first day, he's like getting in super early, and they're like making fun of him. there's this montage of every attorney bringing these huge fucking books, and is like, no attorney has ever failed the bar. So just
One of the
don't
big
do it.
hints that the firm is evil is he gets there early, right? And he was like in the hallway and he sees the two partners standing in the doorway and then they like shut it in his face.
Yeah, that's like immediately like something's up. Like why do you need to do that? I
You
mean, definitely for
also
the audience, that's what it's trying to get at.
realize that they shut they're in the doorway of the office of the guy that dies like
Yeah,
15
one of
minutes
them. Yeah,
later. Yeah.
yeah. And then we get Hackman, which like I think the first time I watched this was like, oh, fucking Gene Hackman's in this. Like I did not know because it's all Tom Cruise's movie.
Right.
Um, and he's great in this. Like so good. Hackman
Oh,
is.
Gene Hackman. I I think he's a very underrated actor. I think when you think of great actors, he's not initially on the list, but
But
I
then when you
really
say
like Gene Hackman.
But then when you say Gene Hackman, everyone's like, "Oh, I love Gene Hackman," but he's not like like he doesn't come to your head right away. Like he's that guy. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
everyone thinks he's great, but they don't maybe like
No,
necessarily like
exactly.
say
Exactly.
who's your top five. You might not make that.
And
Um,
what one of the things that I want to talk about is when they eavesdrop on okay, maybe you could clarify for me. At this point, do they eavesdrop on Tom and his wife conversation about her reluctantness of going to Memphis, or is this because she divulged that she was reluctant to one of the other wives? Because this leads me to one of my, I actually took a lot of notes during this film. This took me to my first point is that did the lawyers pay the her students off?
no,
Because uh they have a conversation and they're like, well, his wife is reluctant, and they go, well, there are things we can do about that. Immediate cut to the kids making this like goodbye arts and craft for her, and it just implied that the lawyers somehow got to the elementary school children and like made them do this.
I don't think that's what the movie was implying at all. But maybe just paid off these inner city Boston kids, and we're like, here's what we're gonna do for you.
I mean, you know what? Because of the rest of the movie, that doesn't surprise me. But it really just feels like just the way they cut it. It really felt like that. Um, but yeah, for some
But
reason, the kid saying goodbye to her convinces her like it's okay to move on.
well, no, I mean at that point she was already moving on, and she was reluctant the whole time. But she was once again at the end of the movie, she says like, I loved you, even if it was just like the dream of, even if it was the promise of you, and and why would I leave? You've kept your promise or whatever. So it's like she had hitched herself to him, and so if he's sure, she was sure. She's definitely taken a very like passive role in this movie, which is very 1990s too. Um, so Hackman is his mentor. I love the lunch where he's like, "It's a rule you can't drink it on company lunches," and then he orders like the martini like right away, and then orders another one. He's like, "I'm allowed a little indulgences." Um, and then the stuff about like, I did this deal. I need you to look at it. And he's like, "Well, how far do you want me to go?" And he's like, "You don't want me to break the law?" He's like, "No, but bend it as far as you can without breaking it." Which
Right.
is also like an in your face sign of like what's going on here.
Of course. Of course. Well, it's kind of crazy too because this is a very long movie, especially for the 90s.
Yeah.
Um, it's like 2 hours and 15 minutes almost, just about, little more. But
There's some fat that could be cut.
I it's mostly for me is the back and forth to where do they go? The tropical island?
Caymans?
Caymans? Is it the Caymans? It's the back and forth to the Caymans that when I was watching this the first time, I was like, they go to the Caymans, they go back to the Caymans towards the end of the movie. Um, when I was watching this the second time, and they're in the Caymans the first time, I was like, "Whoa, wait a minute! Like this whole thing doesn't happen until the end." But no, they're like him, like getting the keys, opening the door and seeing the file boxes, I thought that happened in the end. Um, but it happens in the beginning with him, and then the person who does it in the end is his wife.
They just like it feels like the movie's based off of a John Grisham book, and it just feels like the movie is like we have to get all the details in there.
I
You know what I mean?
appreciate it. I mean, I liked it, right? Like I liked the movie. I think the movie
Well,
plays well. It's just it's extremely long.
well, and what it does is it kind of shows you everything without telling you what's happened. Like it's fairly obvious what his plan is. So it's obvious overall, but like the kind of the nitty-gritty details of what he's actually trying to do by, meeting the Chicago family is not like spelled out for you. So it does a good job of letting it play out, letting you follow it. Like that part's great. So I want to get back to it because there's another, as you said, it's 2.5 hour movie, so we got to keep it moving. But he goes to his friend's house at the firm, and the wife is hysterical. And then he goes outside, and he's like, two guys died, and the guy's like, this guy has to know they were murdered, but he's still distraught. One, because I think he was
Right.
friends with them, and he even says like he had twins that were like the same age as as my son. But he's also like, this shit could happen to me.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that's mainly the reason.
but the other thing is, as this is happening, he's like, oh yeah, Oliver wanted me to tell you that you shouldn't have to worry about your student loans, so we're going to pay for that. As he's just thinking about his friends who are dead, he's like, oh yeah, this money thing, because that's like what runs everything.
Yeah. And I love the detail of like him getting hit by the sprinkler, the rotating sprinkler, but doesn't react to it. Like he's such in distraught and shock and grief that it's just like external feelings don't even matter at this point. It's just it's like it's very like it sets up the tragedy of what it is very well. Um do you think in the book and the novel that this is based on, you said it's very long and they felt like to get all the details right. Um did you notice that his dog's name is Hearsay?
I did not.
Cuz remember his wife leaves a note on the dog's collar.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did not notice that was his dog's
So he
name.
calls the dog over and goes, Hearsay."
I did not pick up on that. That's
Yeah.
funny. Um, the next scene's with the FBI agents that are talking to him, and they're like, What I love about this is that he's like, oh, so you work for Bendini, and he's like, Tom Cruise kind of freaks out, and he's like, how'd you know that? And he's like, oh, points to his book. He's like, oh, okay. He's like, yeah, sorry, I've just been working there for and they're like 8 weeks. He's like, wait, what the fuck?
And
And
you know what would be funny? Like a spoof of this movie. He like looks over. Okay, there's the title of the thing. He's like 8 weeks. He's like what? And then it's like there's another book that's like something like what to do when you're starting in a law firm and you're first 8 weeks or something like that. Just really on the nose.
well, I think is funny about this is the movie for the first 45 minutes, the passage of time is so it's just like it seems like it's the next day, and then it's 8 weeks later. Like he's been there 8 weeks, and it's like, how is that? Besides that, the FBI agent saying it, like, how are we to know that he's been there that long? Like, it doesn't make sense.
What's kind of interesting is like we're introduced to Gene Hackman. He's like, I'm your mentor. Study for the bar. And then he's like, oh, I got to take the bar. He's like, no, come to the Caymans with me first. Then everything that happens in the Caymans happens. And then when you realize, or when Tom Cruise realizes that his house is bugged, and he tells his wife his house is bugged, and then he passes the bar because they have that celebration, right?
Yeah.
And it's like the passage of time happens quickly at some points, but then I feel like a day goes by, or like a week goes by. Like 8 weeks will go by in the same amount of time 1 week will go by in this movie. And it's
Yeah.
confusing.
It absolutely is, and that's like I don't know that it matters, but it does throw you off when you're watching it. Um, so yeah, he goes to the Cayman and he's like immediately sort of like interested in this, he has this natural curiosity about these guys that died. I think at one point, either like, oh, this was the other thing is I think it's when he gets back from the Caymans, maybe he's in like the library area and he's looking at the pictures of these guys that died. And I'm like, how do they fucking have these pictures up already? And it's
Yeah.
because like a bunch of time has passed. Like they commissioned these paintings like so quickly. It'd be funny if they like commissioned them before the guys died. They're like, all right, hey, we're gonna kill these guys. We're gonna get the paintings ready.
But also someone mentioned, I think he got tipped off, right, by the FBI that something weird is happening. That's why he becomes interested in the first place. So when he goes to the Caymans and he sees here's kind of an interesting thing. He goes to the Caymans, he sees the file boxes in Gene Hackman's bungalow, right? And then so he makes that connection. And then he decides to go and talk to the boat captain or like the manager of the fishing uh convoy, whatever. Um
Uh huh.
because he had a son that lost his life during that thing, right? But that's when you find out that there were two other men on that boat and they match the descriptions of, two other suspicious characters. So it's like all these clues are adding up that he's just not, it's something's not right with it.
What's funny is the boat captain's like, yeah, there was one stocky guy, and then there was one guy with like really, really blonde hair, and I was like, you got to make his features definitive so that when we see him later, we're like, that's the guy.
It's like
Um,
someone's like, "Holy shit, that's Hank Schrader from Breaking Bad and Jigsaw from Saw."
they looked exactly like. So next to we're at night, and this woman's trying to seduce him and he says no, but then he sees a woman getting attacked and just by Tom Cruise staring at the guy runs off. And so like they almost played into his like his desire to help people, I guess. Like the fact
They
that he's put in a
definitely did. Yeah.
yeah, so he wouldn't just cheat on his wife, but when you set him up to be like the hero, he's like, all right, yeah, I'll sleep with this hot woman on the beach.
And what he says about to the woman, to the first woman that he rejected, he's like, "Tell my friend thanks, but no thanks." Like he knew she was a prostitute, right? Um but yeah, and then but how quick, like it's almost like they knew that he was going to reject her and they had this whole beach set up, like already planned out. Like, okay, so we're gonna hire the prostitute, but he's gonna reject the prostitute. But you guys on the beach be ready. Make it look good because he's gonna take a walk on the beach immediately after to, I don't know, clear his head or some shit. And then you just immediately run away and you pretend you sprained your ankle, okay? And go.
Then grab his hand, put it on your boob.
Yep.
Well, I think it was just a redundancy, right? Like if he had slept with the first prostitute, then the other two people would have gotten the night off. So
That woman would have been attacked, David.
so he after this, he flies back home, and instead of going to see his wife, he goes to see his brother. And this is the first time we get to know about his brother. And he's like, there's this line from his wife at the end where she's like, Avery was a very decent guy, but he was corrupt and this and that. And she's like, I saw you would have turned into that. And I was like, not really. I mean, that's not what this movie is telling us because at this first sign of corruption, he starts investigating everything and then sort of like throws his life away to like stop it. You know what I mean? I guess he was put in the situation by the FBI of like not having a choice because the FBI came to him and I mean, they would have cracked this eventually, however they needed to.
So you know what's kind of crazy is that he's a lawyer. He's a really good loyal lawyer, I guess. He's a really smart person, is what you come to figure out. Not just because of all the Harvard shit, right? But like the way he uses like the firm, the FBI, and everyone around him to his advantage. And like he's thinking like 900 moves ahead of everyone else, right? We are going to be reviewing The Fugitive pretty soon. And one thing that I thought of the same thing in that film is that he's a doctor, right? But Harrison Ford is a surgeon, but he's also incredibly intelligent, and he's also thinking 900 moves ahead. So there's something about like 90s films that are just like, okay, he's a lawyer and he's a doctor, but they're also like super geniuses,
Right.
just to make
Yeah,
it
and
like convincing, like, oh, he like won out on top of all these other people because he's abnormally intelligent.
well, and that's why Tom Cruise chose the role. I get to run, I get to be the smartest guy in the room, and I get to win in the end. Like
Mhm.
that's how you know. That's how you
Mhm.
know how this movie's gonna end. So he gets back, goes to his brother, and he tells his brother everything, and it's like, I'm in trouble. The line about how it's funny that I went to Harvard and you went to jail, and we're both surrounded by crooks.
Mhm.
Um, oh, one thing real quick: the woman on the beach, Halle Berry, auditioned for that role and did not get it, which
Oh,
is
wow. Wow.
interesting.
Yeah, surprising.
Um, and then his brother knows a private investigator who happens to be Gary Busey, and Gary
Ah,
Busey's fucking great.
yeah. Gary there's absolutely nothing wrong with Gary Busey's character in this film.
Except for the fact that he slept with a 17-year-old.
No, no, no. He's horrible. But like, I don't know, there's something about Gary Busey playing like last movie we watched him in was Point Break, right?
Yeah.
This character is so different from that character. Um and it's kind of a shame that we don't get to see him more in the movie, but he is killed
Right away.
by Jigsaw. And
That's another thing this
yeah.
movie sort of just glosses over, the fact that they were he's like, "Oh, you were asking questions about dead lawyers," and they like the firm found out immediately. Like we don't know who they were watching, that they were able to like, whose phone they were tapping, that they were able to figure that out right away. Also, this firm just has like the best phone tapping capabilities. I guess they get that from like mafia connections, but
Yeah. I mean, crazy too. Okay. I don't know. I've never killed anyone. I don't know if you have. Not that you're going to divulge it here on the pod. But the secretary is underneath Gary Busey's desk because she's about to give him a blowy. And they come in and they shoot him and he dies. And somehow she keeps quiet the entire time and waits for them to leave and then makes her escape. Now, when you kill someone, you don't like go over to the body and like make sure he's dead or nothing. You just like shoot, shoot. Let's get out of here.
it's because the I think Jigsaw had a silencer and the other guy did not.
Oh, that's right, because he got shot in the leg, right? Yeah. The
So
gun
they
went
made a
off.
bunch of they made a bunch of noise. They had to get the fuck out of there. So, and I mean, Gary Busey was for sure dead
Can we also talk about how the secretary about to give Gary Busey a blowy is Holly Hunter?
and very hot in this movie, and also perfectly named Tammy. It's like a great name for that character.
I'm like, when I see her, I'm like, who is she? Because I've been watching Succession and she's in Succession. And I can never, I'm like, and obviously Succession is like a show that comes out now. And this is like 30 years ago. So she looks a lot different. And so I was like, who is she? And then she fucking spoke. And I was like, it's Elastigirl.
Yeah, she's perfect in this. It's funny, like there's not a person that is miscast. Like everyone is great. If you would have told me Wilford Brimley would have been like the security guy, the main heavy of this, I would have been like, I don't know. But he's perfect, right? And like everyone else is perfect in this. So yeah, it's really great. So we are now at the part where his wife was looking for him. Um, then he's like, she's kind of upset, and she's like, oh, he gets home and he's like, I went to see Ray, and she's like, oh, you went to see Ray and you didn't, so we find out, like, you would think like, oh, she doesn't like Ray, but she like really likes Ray.
Yeah. Well, she doesn't know Ray. She just knows that he's
No, she
family.
knows, she knows Ray, because she's like, oh, why would you go without me? I would have gone. Like, she likes Ray.
okay, maybe I misunderstood this. I understood that he has never went to see Ray since he's been with her, and she knows the situation where it was manslaughter, but it was like a bullshit. It's bullshit on the amount of time he spent in prison, right? And so she probably gets the fact that he's a good person, but I don't think she's ever met him. But she's wanted to, and she's wanted him. More importantly, she's wanted him to reconnect with his brother, and that's what she's like really happy about. But I don't think she ever met him.
I also want to make the point that this is like a plot device in a lot of movies. Just because you know how to fight doesn't remove your ability for self-defense. So this is like in this movie and then in Con Air, although Con Air at least explains it partially by
Oh,
like
right, because he
the
was a
guy the guy
boxer.
the guy picks up the knife and walks away with it. So like Nick Cage didn't, the guy did had a knife, but Nick Cage, after he kills the guy by punching him, the knife disappears. So
You
it's
gonna ruin
like
Con Air for people too?
that's the fucking beginning of Con Air. I know how to talk about movies.
Hmm?
So, but it's just a plot point that always like is funny to me is that like, oh, his hands are red. It's like fucking. I talked about Garrett with this, and he just sent me the picture of fucking Brad Pitt from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood when the Bruce Lee character is like, my hands are registered weapons. If I fight you, I go to jail. And if I fight you and you die, I go to jail. And Brad Pitt's like, if anyone kills anyone in a fight, they go to jail. It's called manslaughter.
um, yeah, yeah. Yeah, okay. Well, thanks for clarifying that.
So we are now the hitman killed the guy, he lives, and then now we're in DC, and there's this little part where they decide to send Tom Cruise to DC because we didn't talk about it, but Tom Cruise is in a meeting in the Caymans, and he like really impresses this kind of like Italian, I don't know, he's not a mobster, but he's mobster related. He's receiving money from the mobsters, and like the guy also kind of reveals like, oh, the people from Chicago who think I'm scared of them, whatever. But Tom Cruise is impresses in that, and so then they want to send him to this like training in DC, this tax training or whatever. And the FBI like leaves a note for him in his book, and then they tell him to walk down this way, and then a homeless guy who he gives a quarter to tells him to go to a bench, and it's like he still ends up sitting on a bench with a DOJ attorney. Like if
Yeah.
they're watching him, it's like doesn't they still see it?
Yeah, I always thought that was dumb, but I was like, whatever. They're just trying to make it as much as a Grisham novel as possible at this point, right? The other
Yeah.
thing too is that um when Cruz is like doing his rounds and he visits this guy named Mulholland,
Okay.
and Mulholland is like, "Hey, your people really have to stop overcharging me."
Oh yeah, that guy. Yeah.
And do you find that incredibly convenient that it's like everything that he needs to win is said by this one character that we just meet?
Yeah, I mean, they set it up several times where like, hey, he's calling, you need to meet with him, and then he's like, oh, you need to meet with him, and then he like finally does, right? Because he's supposed to go like business as normal until they can figure this out. You could have had him figure it out in another way, right? Like you could have just had a file on his desk where he's like, why does this say 30 hours? I didn't fucking charge 30 hours. I only charged this amount. Um,
Well, like the what is it? Every positive yeah, like there's some sort of like negative encounter into a positive. Like, okay, so what I'm getting at is that I didn't like this scene because I found it very helpful to the main character, very just ex machina to the main character for like helping him in this situation. But then later on in the movie when he's like trying to buy time and he walks around the museum, just so happens to run into um the wife of the firm guy, and who tells them that,
what?
oh, I just saw Mitch at the museum on Mud Island or whatever, and so that's like
Yeah,
a negative convenience.
yeah. Welcome to the early '90s of screenwriting. So in books.
But do you think
I
that's okay? Like in the beginning, if it's like a positive convenience and it's like counteracted by a negative one later on, kind of equals
no, I
out.
think I think I think it doubles up and makes it worse,
They both
honestly.
suck. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, it doesn't like it's what you expect in movies like this. I think now screenwriters are kind of like you'll get dinged for that a lot more. I mean, this is not a highly rated movie, but it's like I think a beloved movie by a lot of people.
Yeah, I can see
So
that.
it could have been written better in both instances. Because like you could have just had Mitch come back and say, I mean, even worse is right. He gets off of Mud Island and the guy is chasing him, and he gets away, but he just happens to run by Wilford Brimley, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
it's just like completely fucking bad luck. But it's like it's kind of lazy writing. Sorry, John Grisham. Let's get back to where we're actually at. So like they're basically telling him the deal, and then he's talking to the FBI agent Ed Harris. Ed Harris looks completely different than
Yeah,
everything I've
he
ever seen him in
does.
because of the shaved head. Um, he looks like he's always like a little can play menacing, but he looks really fucking menacing in this. But he's I love the one line where he's like, "Yeah, you just wants me to testify against the mafia. Are you out of your fucking mind?"
Oh my god, I think one of my favorite scenes in this movie is at the dog race. That whole thing. It starts out where you have the fake bone, right? The bell is rung, the greyhounds are let go, and it pans up to the audience to the audience. And Tom Cruise is there, Ed Harris is there, and they go, what happens if the dogs ever get the bone? It's like, oh, it's a whole fucking mess. Like that opening thing is great. And then the fact that he's wiretapped and has Ed Harris say, um, like, oh, the goddamn FBI. I can do whatever the fuck I want. And then has Tammy call him and repeat, like, that whole thing is amazing.
No, absolutely, and it's really it's really funny when he gives it to him at the end. He's like, "I could go public with that." He's like, "Why wouldn't you?" He's like, "Because it's illegal." Da da da.
I I I also like in that scene where he's like, "Yeah, you can do whatever you want because you're Mister Agent, whatever his name is, John
Right.
Mahallahan." And he's like, "You goddamn right, I'm Agent John Mahallahan," and and that was the damning evidence, like him
Oh
reciting
yeah,
his
yeah, yeah.
name. Yeah,
So he goes home and tells his wife that about everything. Well, first he tells the firm, which is like an interesting move. I don't know. I thought it was a smart move, but then the movie never really plays with that again. That almost kind of worked to his detriment, right? Like you thought it was like a I don't know because
I don't
it's like
know.
he's on Brimley's radar for the rest of the movie because of that. Brimley like does not trust him.
It would be interesting to see if like he. This is what it must have been. He thought on the off chance that they tailed him and he was caught talking to the FBI, if he didn't
That he had to
outrightly
tell them.
admit it, then it would look bad on him. But the fact that,
And
I mean, he's right, but the fact that they didn't, I mean, how was he supposed to know that, you know?
well, and they might have. The movie just never addresses. The movie doesn't say that they did, but he tells them. I like at the end of when he tells them, Gene Hackman's just like, "So who do we bill for this hour?"
Trying to lighten the mood, but everyone else is like, oh, fuck. Right? But
And
why didn't they just tell him? Like, if all the other lawyers in the firm know, why don't they just at that point be like, all right, listen, you want to be a part of this thing? This is what's up. You're cool with it or we just fucking kill you.
well, because at that point they don't know if they can trust him, and now that he's been talked to by the FBI, it's like we really now need to see immediately if they trust him, right? And so he goes home and tells his wife, and she runs outside, and she's like, "They can't ask you to do that." And he's like, "They aren't asking." Like I've
Oh,
thought this
she
all the
runs
way through.
outside? No,
Yeah,
she runs outside.
there's no difference between the word you used and the word I used right
She
there.
fucking books it. And then this is where we
That's a different word.
yeah, yeah. And then this is where we get Tom Cruise booking it in like, his 90th movie that he's booked it in.
Well, this was one of the beginning ones, you know. So then we get Busey's secretary shows up and she tells him about the guys and she describes them and Cruz immediately is like, oh, it's the fucking guy from the boat. Um, and so this sort of he's like, oh, we'll have to. He like kind of subtly says like, oh, well, we'll have to find some office space or something like that, and then he sets her up to start copying files, right? But right after this, Brimley gets him, and then the hitman is right there, and I think Cruz recognizes him, and they take him to the middle of nowhere to show him the photos of him sleeping with the woman, just
Yeah.
like to really. I love the way Brimley's like not just screwing, intimate oral acts, really getting up in there.
Yeah, I love the way like the dialogue in that too. The way he plays it off. He's like, God, and you don't you don't want these to get out. Like if the FBI knew, like, and they sent that to your mailbox, and your poor old wife opens the mailbox and finds that, and it's just a really great way of like telling him that we're gonna fucking blackmail you without telling him they're gonna blackmail him.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty right in his face about it. And then he goes back and he's like, "Oh, I need to." The guy's like, "Hey, we need you in conference room right now." And he's like, "Oh, let me just drop off my coat." And he's like, "No, right now. It's so important that you come in here with those photos." And then everyone's in there, and he's like, "Well, you didn't pass the bar number one, but you passed number two." And then his wife's there, and he like happens to drop the photos, and he does something that is like so smart after this, but he doesn't do it because it's the right thing to do, like the
Right.
smart thing to do. He
Yeah.
tells her he cheated because he feels guilty, but it is the smart thing to do because like you don't have a choice but to screw over your firm. So you might as well tell your wife right away because she's
Right.
gonna find out.
Right.
Um,
But what's
but then
worse
he's
though? What's worse? You tell her, okay, just follow my thought here. You tell her you still fuck over the firm still blackmails you, still sends the photos, then she sees the photos. So she knows and then she sees the photos. So it's like a double whammy. Or she finds out when she sees the photos. So it's like a one big whammy.
No, you want to tell her now because she also sort of like kind of has to stay with you, even though she makes the decision not to. And he's, you know, they're like go through this whole thing where she's like, "I can't stay with you," and he's like, "Well, you have to. We have to come up with a good lie." And she's like, "All right, let's go in there and perform," which they don't buy. It's also funny they at the same time find out about his brother. And the scene before where Gene Hackman makes the joke about like, "Oh, who do we bill this to?" He's like, kind of like, "Ah, it's not a big deal." And then they find out about the brother, and Gene Hackman's like, "Of course he fucking lied to you about it. If I had a felon brother and I'm trying to get a nice law firm job, I'm not going to tell you about it. Like, it's not a thing to worry about. You know, it's not suspicious." And Wilford Brimley's like, "I'm paid for things like that to be suspicious." And so Wilford's on the case. But it's like we're getting these signs that Hackman is not the bad guy, that we, you know, he's not the worst guy here. So it's like when he does turn in the end and do the right thing, it's like I expected it. So it's not out of nowhere. It's like some of the better writing in the movie to me.
No, I
And
I
then
agree. I agree. It's good, and yeah, they use it against him, right? Because they know a prison guard in the prison, and the prison guard told them that the FBI let him go early, right? Like that was the whole connection there.
well, they do, but it's a fax that falls underneath. I want to talk about the timing of that later when we get to what we're going to move through this, I guess, a little bit quicker now because we've been going for a while. But so he has the meeting with the client, and this is when he makes the plan of like, this is how I can not violate attorney-client confidentiality, and like, so I'll get to keep my law license, and I won't have to go into witness protection. Like, he comes up with this whole plan, and we only know, as the audience, we only know part of it. We don't know the end goal of like, I'm basically going to have this information over the mafia that if they try and kill me, it'll get released, and so like, you need to leave me alive. Just leave me the fuck alone, and I'll leave you alone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so
Which he's
he comes
right.
up.
It's the best way to diffuse the whole situation because it's over the firm's head. The mafia controls the firm, and then all that's shit we'll talk about later with the FBI and Ed Harris. Yeah.
And so he comes up with this plan. He sets Tammy up, and then he has the scene with the FBI agent where he's like, I want 1.5 million of my brother, and he's like, your brother killed the guy, and he was like, it was manslaughter, and like, he's not that bad of a guy. And then this is your favorite line right after this. I think I found a way out if we follow the law. And then she's like, but that doesn't change the fact that you cheated on me, and I'm out.
Yeah. So this next part with her motivation, it's a little weird, right? So she knows pretty much nothing of his plan. And she goes to school. It's like her last day, right? She put in her resignation to go back to Boston. And Avery shows up. And what I like about this movie is that it's very subtle in the way it does certain things, right? It doesn't hit you over the head like movies nowadays. I feel like treats the audience pretty dumb. But Avery has been showing interest in Tom Cruise's wife for like the whole film, subtly.
Uh-huh.
And
Not
he
very subtle, actually.
well, not now, because he goes to her workplace and invites her to the Caymans, knowing, right? Because they knowing that their marriage is on the rocks.
Yep. So
Um,
he's kind of a bad guy, and he's like, this isn't working out for you anyway, so let me get a little taste.
and he couldn't really think that she was going to accept his offer to the Caymans, which she doesn't initially. And he's like, "Yeah, I figured, okay, whatever." Now, I don't know if you noticed this or found this funny, but when that conversation is done, she's like, "No, I don't want to go to the Caymans with you." And he's like, "Okay." She turns and then books it away from him, like runs away from him.
Well, the reason is because Tom Cruise had told her the plan about how to get those files, the fact that he's going to go diving, so it'll give them a chance, right? Well, he says, "Oh, it's a short trip. I can't dive." So she runs to go warn Tom,
I know
but
why
Tammy's like,
I know why she's in a hurry, but the fact that she immediately is like, "All right, I'll see you later, Avery." Like right in his eyes.
yeah, it's a little weird. I agree. But she was like, really concerned about helping out Tomcat, so she kind of needed to. And she calls Tammy, and Tammy's like, I have no way of contacting him. Um, so
That brings
she
me to
just
another
shows up.
thing.
She just shows up in the Caymans, though.
How does Abby know Tammy? They've never met, and doesn't Tom want to keep her away from like this whole thing? That I looked through this film. There is no way that she knows Tammy. They've never met, they've never talked to each other. But somehow conveniently it's like, yeah, Tammy, I'm going with Avery to the Caymans. And they devise this whole plan, although they've never talked and never met.
I think, well, so I don't remember offhand because like I just accepted it, but I mean, he tells her the entire plan. So like I think he just has mentioned Tammy, and maybe it's something that happened off screen or whatever, but I mean, it's like it's not inconceivable to me that they know each other, right? He actually hasn't been keeping it away from her. He's been telling her everything, but just not like the very dangerous parts, but he hasn't really kept it from her.
I okay. I mean, I guess it's just something you have to buy if it's not like spelled out in the film. But I just didn't see a way that they could have known about each other or even had each other's contacts. But you're right. So she ends up going to the Caymans. I guess flights are super easy to get back in the 90s.
Well, I mean, they're kind of rich, right?
Oh yeah, that's true. They're fucking yeah, that's true.
And while all this is happening, I love the stuff with Ray where they like get him out of jail. They hone in on the security guard looking, and you're like, oh, so that's the bad security guard
Yeah,
who's like,
that's the guy.
and then they just let him walk. I assumed they were just gonna keep a hold of him, but they like, nah, walk, get the fuck out of here. But they try and then track him, which makes no sense, right? Like just keep a hold of him. Why? But they try and track him. And then the whole thing with the Elvis and going in the bathroom, like I loved all that. And then like
Yeah.
you see him in the truck just eating a snack. Um, And,
You
like, they call and he's like, we lost Ray. And he's like, you lost Ray? What are you following him? He's like, you motherfucker.
yeah, and then Ray is also part of Mitch's plan for the Caymans because doesn't isn't just conveniently Ray's a pilot? Doesn't he pilot the airboat? Not the
He
airboat,
gets
the water
no,
plane?
it's some guy flies it. There was the guy that brought Abby back to the mainland from the Caymans took Ray. He was like this long haired
Oh,
dude.
so was Ray okay, so Ray's only thing was to get out. Ray wasn't part of like bringing the files, right?
He was then at the end in charge of the files. Tammy gives
Okay,
him, and
okay.
he like starts hitting on Tammy. He's like, "Oh, you got a pretty mouth," or something like that. Or I like the
Yeah,
way you
it's
talk.
I love your crooked little mouth.
She's like, "That's not even the best part of me,"
I was
which I
like,
assume was she was talking about her vagina. So
oh, I thought it was boobs or butt. My, how you told me how you just assumed my favorite line was when Tom Cruise is like, "We just follow the law," right? Wrong. It comes from Ed Harris when they lost Ray, and Harris is in the thing, and he goes, "Get me a map of Louisiana." And then everyone just kind of stands around and goes, "Get me a map of Louisiana."
yeah, that's also good. Which you can also imagine Tommy Lee Jones saying in like a fugitive movie. I need a perimeter and I need a map of Louisiana.
And I don't
Um,
care.
so at the same time, Gene Hackman is taking Abby back to his place, starts stumbling. He's like, why are you here? You're not being truthful. He can tell he's been drugged. So he's like trying to get the truth out of her. And she's like, I'm here to punish him for cheating on me. And she like, her punishment is she kisses him. That's it. That's like all she gets. And then they start scanning files. The timing of this end of the movie is so fucking convenient.
Yeah.
So like they start scanning the files and then Brimley hears the phone call, which is like, why did you not fucking pull out the phone?
Right.
Pull the phone out of the fucking wall.
Right.
And why are you calling? She's like, oh, I drugged him. And she's like, just get the keys. Like they've been tapping everything. Of course they've tapped this.
The thing too. Oh, another shitty convenient writing thing in this film is the fax rolling under the fax
Yeah.
machine. Holy
So-
shit.
Well, this is what I want to say is it rolls under and then Brimley finds it the next day. And as soon as he finds it, he's like, they got Ray. And 5 seconds later, the FBI gets a call from the jail like, hey, so we started questioning this prison guard because he sent a fax. It's like, so it was gone long enough to then let the FBI get, like, it's just so convenient.
Yeah. It too convenient, some might say. But yeah, you're right. So yeah, Avery is kind of turns a new leaf and lets her go. He gets killed in the process, right? Because I think it's obvious that he let
Well,
her
no,
go.
we find out we find out he dies because they drowned in his bathtub. But what I think is interesting is like
No, wait.
she walks in.
You know they killed him, right? They drowned him in the bathtub. He didn't just drown on his own accord.
You're so fucking frustrating sometimes. Like, of course I know that.
Okay.
Do you think what he just like he got up and was like, oh man, I'm so groggy. I need a bath, but I'm just gonna go face first into it. Of course they killed him.
You just made it. I said they killed him, and you were like, "Oh, but he actually drowned." I was like, "You're the one who's frustrating."
He did drown in the bathtub.
By murder. He murder drowned.
Oh my god. What I want to say is, so Abby comes in, hears this phone call, and she's like, "Oh, my plan is to sneak the keys." And I guess they think that secrecy is really important. I guess at the time it makes sense that they're trying to do this without the firm discovering so that they can get away. But she's like, I got to sneak the keys back in here. Just stick them on the fucking counter, like next to something and get the fuck out of there. But she gets in her robe, gets into bed. He's there. And then she starts to whip him out. And he's like, no. It's like, I'm on to everything. All right. Like, no need for this.
Look,
She was going to fuck Gene Hackman right there.
No,
and
she
that's
wasn't.
why Yeah, that's why he is a good guy, because he was like, I could get this right now. But he's like, no, you need to. They're going to be here in 10 minutes. You need to get the fuck out
No,
of
I
here.
don't think he's as good of a guy as you think he is. The reason he stopped her is because he doesn't want them fucking walking in the middle of them having sex. Like he knows they're
I
like hot
imagine
on the tray.
he could
Oh,
have
he
finished.
finished.
He could
Yeah.
have finished in. He had 10 minutes. 10
Mm.
minutes is plenty. Plenty of time
Now
for him to get it done.
it sounds like we're coming to the end of the movie, but there is so much left. Because all the while that this is all
There's 5
happening,
chase scenes left in this movie.
okay, so all the while that this is happening with Abby and Avery and the bungalow and no boobs happened, uh, Tom Cruise is running for his life. We already briefly talked about it, how he's trying to get away from um, Jigsaw and Hank Schrader and
So there's this whole other plot inconvenience, as you've been calling them, where they have all these invoices, but they just don't have fucking numbers on them. Like they don't. So he has to go into the office to print out these things. I don't even still understand the logistics of that. Like these documents in the Caymans are clearly not important if they don't have the numbers on them. They don't mean anything if he has to then go back. So it's like this whole thing has been for naught. But he has to go into the office, which is just to set him up because Brimley finds the facts at the same time. So it's just to set up the end of the movie with him running.
yeah.
And he comes out, and the fucking main guy is like, hey, we need you to come in this conference room. And then Brimley walks up, but he gets this call from a judge, and it happens to be Ed Harris. And he's like, you need to run if you can. Can you get out of there? And he's like, I understand. And he looks at Brimley, and Brimley's like, come on. And he starts running. And the main lawyer and Brimley look at each other like he's so fucking pathetic. They're like, he's not going to get out of here. And then he gets out of there immediately.
Okay, wait. So where's the convenient part?
The convenience part is the plot inconvenience part is that they have these documents in the Caymans that are supposed to be important that are hidden behind a locked door, but they're worthless without the numbers. So it's in order to get the numbers, he has to go into the office, which then puts him in harm's way. Like
So
that's the part. It just
do you also find it convenient that there was just a cotton truck there for him to jump into?
obviously,
You're
obviously.
wrong. It's not. It's actually one of the smartest written things in this whole fucking movie.
Go on.
That cotton truck was planned from the get-go. Don't ask me how he knew he would be trapped in the firm and needing it as a way out, but he, at the very beginning of all of this, tells Tammy to go and do something with that cotton factory over there. He's like, hey, I need you to do me a favor. Are you up for doing me a favor? She goes, sure. And he goes, you see that cotton mill over there? She goes, yeah. And then the scene cuts just for the payoff that she probably paid someone to like park the cotton truck right there because he knew that in the case of he needing to get out, he throws the chair and he jumps out. And I almost shit my pants because I was like, why couldn't they write the rest of the movie that way?
Still seems highly, highly convenient, but it's good. I mean, I like it, but it is very, very convenient. But he gets out. He's getting chased around. He calls the FBI, and the FBI is like, so he this whole time has been planning to fly to Chicago to talk to
Right.
the mafia.
Right.
But he then finds out that the mafia is coming to Memphis, so he's like, I gotta buy a few hours. And the FBI is like, just fucking come in. He's like, nah, not doing that. So he goes to Mud Island for some reason, which is, I guess, a real place
It's like a tourist trap, right?
in the middle of Memphis.
I mean, they have to have something.
I mean, they got Graceland. So he goes on
Yeah,
this
but
tour.
imagine how different it would be if Jigsaw and Hank Schrader trying to chase Tom Cruise around Graceland.
He like hides in a bathroom and he looks over and it's like, oh, this is where
Oh,
he died.
shit.
Oh shit, I
Oh,
gotta get out of
fuck.
here. So he goes to Mud Island. He gets seen by the one woman who we've met. She is taking her kids on a field trip, and he gets seen there. Is this a
Convenience.
Saturday? Is this a Saturday, or is she a chaperone for a school trip? So she sees him, And then he just is sitting over on Mud Island for a while, and then he makes a call and finds out that Abby went down and helped him by probably sleeping with Gene Hackman, he has to assume. So then he decides to leave Mud Island, and he's the entire ride over just thinking about Gene Hackman plowing his wife. And then he gets out, and Hank is there, and Jigsaw is there, and there's cops there. And I thought, oh, he's just going to walk over by the cops and be like, oh, they can't get to me. But instead, he he kicks Hank in his messed up knee because he can see him limping, and then runs. And then he gets away, but he ran by Wilford Brimley. So then we get to the scene where he's in the rafters.
He's in the rafters in like a warehouse. And I love how he's trying all the doors. And then Jigsaw is like behind him and he's trying all the doors. But they're okay. Let me ask you something. If you're trying multiple doors and one of them opens, wouldn't you immediately lock it behind you so that when the other guy is trying all the doors, he skips that one? And then if you're the other guy chasing someone down and all these doors are locked, wouldn't you just assume that he's on the other side of one of these and he just locked it?
Well, what I don't understand is he ran into this building to get away, and then he's immediately trying to break out of the building through the tiniest of windows, or was his plan to break the window and then get in the rafters and get the jump on these guys? Like I don't understand what he's doing.
So my thought process is he initially wanted to escape through the window, but then realized that he either can't fit or is not going to have the time to do so. So he's like, if I can break the window and make it look like I escaped through the window and then hide in the rafters, they'll come in, look at the window, think, oh shit, he escaped from the window, and they're too big to crawl through it, right? So they'll leave and then they'll give him to leave, but he leaves his case on the ground, which
And he's sweating profusely.
so he's in the rafters. He's sweating. The sweat drips. You think Mission Impossible stole this?
I don't think stole it. I think that he was like, they're like, I don't know, what do we do with this scene? And Tom is like, well, have you seen The Firm?
It's kind of great though. I hope okay, that's my life plan. If I ever happen to meet Tom Cruise, that is like if you
You
could
want to
meet
drip
Tom
sweat
Cruise.
on him?
Yeah. No, he drips sweat on me. If I ever meet Tom Cruise and I have one
back.
chance I have one chance to ask him one question, I would be like, Mr. Cruise, is there any connection between the sweat scene in The Firm and the sweat scene in Mission Impossible?
Has Michael Caine gotten back to you on the island yet?
Uh no. He
Shocker.
hasn't. Yeah, surprisingly.
So Wilford Brimley tells Jigsaw, hey, I'm going to go in the front. You go in this way. And then they just forget that the other one's in the building.
No, what's so beautiful about it is that he sees Jigsaw's like shadow silhouette, but Jigsaw is holding the briefcase, and he just assumes that that's Cruz. Yeah,
Yeah, whatever. And then Cruz beats an old man with diabetes to death.
maybe.
So Cruz then is like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go talk to some mafia guys. And I don't think you could pick two better people for these roles.
No, I agree. I'm pretty sure one of them has played a mafia guy before.
They both have all the time.
Oh.
And the one guy, so you have Paul Sorvino, obviously, but then Joe Vitarelli. I was like, what have I seen him from?
Okay, maybe you can clarify, because I feel like I've seen him something too.
Well, he was in Analyze This, but the thing, I was like, what do I Analyze This and Analyze That? I was like, but what is the thing that I recognize him from being super like mafia guy? And it's Mickey Blue Eyes, which is like maybe a lesser known movie, but it's Mickey Blue Eyes is a Hugh Grant movie where he like sort of gets in, he gets in the mafia a little bit. Like his father. Oh, stars Gene Triplehorn, who is Abby in this movie, but James Caan is like his soon to be father-in-law, and like he gets like in the mafia a little bit. So, um, but I think this is my favorite scene in the movie where he talks to the mafia guys, and he's like, the guy's like, "Hey, you care to sit down?" He's like, "Not really," and then he just kind of goes in this whole thing about how like I'm your attorney and my firm has been overbilling you, and I need you to sign off to show that they've been overbilling you. I can give it to the FBI. And the one guy is like, well, but what? And he like knows exactly what question he's going to ask. He's like, no, no other information of yours is going to go to the FBI. I'm going to keep all of that, but I will have it, and I do have it. And I'm just like the metaphor he uses about like just a ship that never goes to port. He's like, as long as I'm alive, I'll just I'll just be out there, and you'll never have to worry about it. It's like it's the best scene to me.
Once he no, it's good. Once he has that and he goes I think Ed Harris goes to his house, right?
Yep.
And um
They
he's
first go
like,
to Tammy's office and then they go to his house because they find nothing at the office, basically.
that's right, that's right. But he basically hands him over all this stuff. He's like, this is enough to put him away. He's like, this is what? What is this? He's like, okay, it's not sexy, but it's stuff that'll stick. And um he explains the Capone, like it's how we got Al Capone. And for every file, it's like what, 5 years and a minimum of
$10,000 fine.
$10,000 fine, but there's like hundreds of these, right? There's like you could put them away for life and like $4 million they owe you. Like it would shut down the firm immediately. Ed Harris isn't too happy about it, but he like accepts it. And then you have Abby coming back.
Yeah, and there's this part beforehand where when she's talking to Gene Hackman, he's like, "Listen, Abby, we set your husband up. We set him up because we wanted dirt on him. That's what the firm does." And I was like, "Oh, so she's just gonna forgive him because he was set up, even though it's like the firm didn't take his dick and put it in the hooker, right? Like he still did
Mm.
that part, but like
Mm-hmm.
in the 1990s movie logic, because it was a setup to get it, to make him dirty, like it's fine. And so she decides to take him back, which I think she was anyway. Um, but
Yeah,
I
she
just thought,
was she was pretty much there. Yeah.
yeah. And then before that, though, when Ed Harris is like, "How did you even think about mail fraud?" And he's like, "Because it was on the bar, and they made me steady for it so hard." It's like, so it's their fault that I
It's
was
their
able to
fault.
undo them. Um, And yeah, and then there's this weird 90s voiceover as like the credits are rolling where it's like, "Oh, we're going to go back to Boston and we'll start this little firm, and everything is going to be okay."
Yeah, I don't know. Do you like I mean, that's such a trope of the times, right? Like it's not my favorite thing. They could have just ended it without that and I would have been okay. But at least like he starts his own firm. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think you need the voiceover. I just think you like in the movie now like just leaves that kind of to chance, or leaves that to like the imagination.
Here's a thought. They filmed it. They filmed him like putting some boxes in an empty office and like brushing off a nameplate or something. But the movie is already so goddamn long that they had to cut it and they're like, "Oh, but how will they know he started his own firm?" And then some executives like, "Oh, we'll just have him do a voiceover quickly at the end while the credits are like beginning to roll." And everyone's like, "Great." And that's what I think too. Is like the movie's already so long is that there's a definitely like maybe a scene needed to like clarify a few things, but they probably just cut it for time.
Like clarify what?
We were talking about something that was like, oh, if we never saw like
I get
exact
Abby and Tammy.
Abby and Tammy knew each other. It's like maybe they just felt like, oh, we shot it, but we don't really need it, and that just was like a scene that ended up on the cutting room floor.
Maybe, yeah. I don't remember. I don't remember it being. It wasn't an issue when I watched it. Like it didn't.
Well,
I didn't.
obviously, because it ended up on the cutting room floor.
Well, no, I'm saying it didn't. Yeah. Well, whatever. There's a couple things. So originally, this was directed by Sidney Pollack. Originally, Tom Cruise wanted to direct and star in it. Um, Frances McDormand was considered for the role of Tammy. I think Holly Hunter is a better
Huh.
choice. Robin Wright turned down the part of Abby, which I think
Huh.
she would have. It's a smaller. It's like I don't know. I think either could have done it. I think Gene Triplehorn's fine in it. Um, and Jason Patrick and Charlie Sheen, I think, were either considered or turned down the Mitch McDear role, the Tom Cruise role. I think Tom
Right.
Cruise is like the person for this.
Oh, he's the
And
perfect person for this.
one thing I read, which is kind of interesting, is Sidney Pollack originally thought about having Mitch McDear be a woman and have an affair with the Avery Tolar Gene Hackman, um, and it was going to be played by Meryl Streep, and that would have been interesting. But the movie has this whole kind of theme and like like the fact that all the attorneys are like white men, and like I don't know, it's just having her come in and it would have changed a lot. I think it still would have worked, right? But I don't know. The movie is for all the like shit talking we did about the plot conveniences. The movie is like highly entertaining and like it's a very good movie. Um, but yeah, that would have been an interesting take on it.
Yeah. I mean, look, I like you said, this movie doesn't have the best ratings, but I really like it. And when I first saw it, I was like, "Oh, I'm sure you've seen this." And then when you told me you haven't, I was just like, I was like kind of disappointed because I wanted to talk to you about it immediately. But then
Well, here
I
you
was
go.
like, "Oh yeah, thank." But then I was like, "Oh wait." By the way, I had to wait a year and a half to talk to you about this film. Um, but then I was like, "Oh shit, we could do an episode on it because it fits our criteria pretty perfectly." Um,
I told
but
my dad last night. This was one of the movies that was in our VHS cabinet, and I told him I was like, I never watched it because I looked on the back and saw it was rated R, but not for nudity, and I was like, why waste my time?
um, I when I was younger, I wanted to be a lawyer, and the movie that made me want to be a lawyer was Daredevil with Ben Affleck.
Obviously, yeah.
And yeah. Um, and do you think if you saw this, because this is you're a tax lawyer, this is about tax lawyers. If you saw this film when you were younger, do you think it would have made you want to go down this career that you've already gone down more, or do you think it would have made you want to stay away from it?
I don't know. I sort of just back. I mean, I wanted to be a lawyer since the time to kill. Um, and I the tax law part I just sort of backed into, so it wasn't really a choice. It was more of just like a things worked out that way. So
Hey, you
I
could
don't love.
be sitting on $250,000 a year if you took the Tom Cruise route.
That's true. That's true. Well, I just would have had to been top 5 at Harvard. So,
Well, thanks for listening to another episode of I Finally Watched. I'm Alain.
and this is David, and today I finally watched The Firm.